Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cattie Rosca. I'm so glad y'all are here today. Wonderful turnout. I think people are a little bit curious about this subject. I'm here with my friend Shyla. She will introduce herself in a bit. We met through the Second Life Death Cafe in Second Life. I am an end-of-life doula in regular life and in Second Life. And as part of that, we look at death in a safe, comfortable place. And during that, we got to talking several times about what do you do when you lose someone in Second Life? What do you do when someone disappears in Second Life? And I was so impressed when Shyla put together the concept of asking and answering the question, where did they go? I'm so happy to be able to present this with her today and answer some of your questions later. And with that, I will turn this over to the amazing Shyla the Super Gecko.
Thank you, Cattie. I'll stand on this box here so I'm a little easier to see. I'm a little small. I am Shyla the Super Gecko, and I'm an orator. I'm a writer. I'm a poet, and I'm the poet in residence at the Glinka Gallery here in Second Life. I read for people throughout Second Life, and I'm also the director of performing arts at the historic virtual Hotel Chelsea here in Second Life. It's a replica of the New York venue, and I like to research things. So we will do a presentation. Let's get right into it. This is Where Did They Go? Your Second Life Living Will. I'll do this in text and voice. For some, our relationships in the virtual world are as real as those in our physical world. And this presentation hopes to encourage consideration of how to let those we care about in our physical and virtual lives know when our physical world causes us to be away for an unexpected, extended period, or when we die. We will suggest a contact tree model and discuss the hierarchy of contacts, define contact roles, and how to choose key contacts. There will be a discussion of an alternative option to notify those on your SL friends list when you die. We will outline the steps required to bequeath your SL account when you die. And we will summarize and offer a brief question and answer session and close by sharing helpful key resources. If you are here, I am thinking you felt it, that feeling of where did they go? Sometimes people disappear from the physical world or Second Life for a little or a long time, and we don't know why. We may worry, are they safe? Did their computer go screwy? Can they not get online? It's worrisome when someone disappears unexpectedly. Anonymity can be a benefit of Second Life, but it can also leave friends and loved ones in our virtual lives concerned if we suddenly stop coming online. Let's look at what a contact tree might look like and discuss its components. First, there is you, or rather in this case me, and then there is a primary physical world and primary virtual world contact. communication lines to you as well as to each other. There are also secondary contacts who have specific lines of communication between themselves and the appropriate primary world contact, as well as to additional world contacts. In this model, the primary contacts branch out to a few secondary contacts who then branch out to a greater number of additional contacts. Communication of your status expands until it reaches all those we wish to keep in the loop. This is true for physical and virtual contacts. Physical world contacts in this model work with physical world contacts only, and virtual world contacts reach out to other virtual world contacts only, but this need not be the case. If a primary physical world contact knows the basics of accessing and communicating in Second Life, then separate physical and virtual lines of communication may not be necessary. Conversely, if a primary virtual world contact is willing to notify both virtual and physical world contacts, then you may not need or want separate primary physical world contact. You will know how to modify the model to best suit your needs. I will keep an image of the contact tree visible here to your left as we move forward.
And it's not on purpose, but yes, it looks like a fish.
Yes, it does. It's a sideways tree, sort of. Let me stop pressing the escape key so my camera stays in place. Here we go. The hierarchy of contacts is primary, secondary, and additional. Primary contacts are people very close to you that you trust with your key personal information. Secondary contacts are the next tier. The secondary physical contacts and, if desired, tertiary and so on, might be relatives, close friends, key medical professionals, event organizers, etc. Secondary virtual contacts and tertiary, etc., might be group leaders, sim owners, and again, event coordinators. Additional contacts are the final recipients of information. Additional physical contacts might be people you know from a regular get-together, or less direct relatives such as aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews. And additional virtual contacts might be group members, sim visitors, event attendees. Who should our contacts be? And it helps to define each role. This model recommends having only one primary physical and one primary virtual world contact. A good primary contact is someone you frequently interact with, someone who is likely to notice an unexpected absence. They must be someone you trust with personal information about you. This may include your personal contact information, such as full physical world name, email, and phone number, so they can reach out to you directly, and address, in case they need to request a wellness or welfare check. A wellness or welfare check is a request made by calling 911 or the non-emergency of your local police telephone number. When made, a police officer will come to your home and check if you're okay. Anyone with your full name and address can request a wellness welfare check, including your primary contacts if you are missing unexpectedly for an extended period of time and they cannot reach you using the contact information in your guidelines. You may also want to share medical information. For example, your local hospital name, its phone number and address, and your emergency contacts' names and contact information. They, your primary contact, must be willing to notify your secondary contacts per your guidelines. Your primary physical and virtual world contact criteria is the same. Both primary contacts need the other's contact information, such as name, email address, and phone number. For a primary physical world contact to reach out to a secondary physical world contact, they require the secondary contact's name and phone number. This is your physical world contact. A primary virtual world contact only needs secondary virtual world usernames, or because usernames often change these days, you can use the key found on their profile. The selection process for secondary contacts varies from primary contacts. Secondary contacts are those who A, your corresponding primary contact agrees to notify if something happens to you, B, agree to work with their corresponding primary contact to resolve inquiries about you, and C, agree to notify additional contacts. You can create additional levels of tertiary contacts and so on. The primary goal of secondary and tertiary, etc., is to minimize the number of people one person must notify. It's important to keep it feasible for each contact involved, including yourself. As a rule, ask contacts at the primary and secondary levels if it is okay to share their necessary contact information. Physical primary and physical secondary contacts exchange contact information, phone numbers, and vice versa. Virtual primary contacts receive virtual secondary contact information, username and key, and vice versa. Primary contacts are key to your contact tree. The most important task between you and your primary contacts is communication. Both you and your primary contacts have specific duties. You and they must agree as to what they are, and this is done through your agreed upon guidelines. Guidelines need to be documented and communicated, such as who the secondary contacts are they will contact if required, and those secondary contacts in contact information. B, how many unexpected days away or missed events meetings before reaching out to you or your other primary contact. C, what information are you okay with your primary contact sharing with your secondary contacts should it be necessary? This varies for people depending on how private or open they wish to be with others about their situation.
Yeah, some people are very open and sharing with personal information, and other people really appreciate their anonymity. And this means that you get to determine how much you share. It's not written in stone. You determine that.
Right, and it goes back to the trust of trusting your primary contacts to not only have your information, but to pass on information per these guidelines. And D, who, if anyone, you wish to inherit your SL account. It can be anyone in the virtual or physical world. And E, keep this information updated. Notify primary contacts of any additions or changes in any primary or secondary contact information or your own. The list of primary or secondary contacts to be notified, or any aspect of your guidelines. It is best to write guidelines down and share them with your primary contacts. This can be done, for example, through Google Docs or other applications which allow the sharing of documents. This avoids hard copies, which may be out of date, and the need for you to notify primary contacts of every change you make to your guidelines. They can look them up when the time comes. This will save them concern and time. They are providing a valuable service, so it's important to communicate well and keep it simple for them. The primary contact has duties too. Your relationship together is a contract, an agreement, so make sure they understand and agree to their responsibilities as documented in your guidelines. They need to reach out to you should you unexpectedly be away for an extended period of time, or they reach out to your other primary contact if you should be unreachable. You take responsibility for notifying your primary contacts of expected time away. So when you are away unexpectedly, they will reach out to you first and then each other to see if either knows your status. If neither primary contact knows your status, they can start trying to figure it out using key information you provided. Ensure your guidelines include information to help them seek you out. This is why primary contacts need your full legal name, personal contact information, emergency contact information, and hospital information. Your primary contacts are responsible for notifying secondary contacts of your status when there is an unexpected absence. The information they share is determined by you via your guidelines. On occasion, a secondary contact may reach out to their respective primary contact to ask about you if you're missing unexpectedly. This should be rare. And this is because by setting and the amount of time you might unexpectedly be away will help them determine when to inquire. So if you say, everything's fine unless I'm away for 2 weeks, then your secondary contacts wouldn't inquire unless you were gone more than 2 weeks. And likely, your primary contact will already know this. You create simpler and more general guidelines for secondary contacts. These need not include personal information, but do include who your primary contact is and how to reach them if they notice you are missing for an unexpected, extended period of time. They also need to know who your additional contacts are and how to reach them. Secondary physical world contacts need your additional physical world contacts' names and phone numbers, whereas secondary virtual world contacts need the name and profile key of your additional virtual world contacts in SL, but not their address or phone number. It's important they know how many days away or missed events meetings before they reach out to their respective primary contact. Update and communicate changes to your guidelines. Notify secondary contacts of any changes to who your primary and additional contacts are or their contact information. You may wish to let secondary contacts know of expected time away. Secondary contacts are likely people you see regularly too, so this may not be difficult. They run groups or events or sims you go to where you have gotten to know people. Secondary contact duties include communicating with primary contacts only when you are missing unexpectedly for the stated period in your guidelines, and this helps reduce the frequency of contact between primary and secondary contacts, keeping it simpler for everyone. Secondary contacts notify additional contacts should your primary contacts provide them with your status during an unexpected extended absence. Additional contacts receive information from secondary contacts. There is no need to provide additional contacts with secondary contact information. If they are concerned, you can assure them there is a contact tree in place and someone will tell them your status if something keeps you away unexpectedly. Additional contacts have no duties. They are the final tier in the tree and are information receivers rather than information generators.
That's really important to look at the tertiary people after the secondary level. They are not information givers. They just receive information. And because you have something like this in place, the third level stuff that can turn into gossip and worry and anxiety is taken care of because there is someone in place who will have gotten the information or can take the information all the way back to primary. So that level of, oh my God, what's happening, and the drama, it cuts back on the possibility of drama, which I think is a really good thing.
Yes, exactly. So what if it's not possible to have a contact tree? It might be that there is no one you deeply trust with your personal information, and that's a perfectly good reason not to have one. There is still a way to ensure your SL friends know, at least if you die. To do this, update your will to direct Linden Lab to notify your friends list of your death. You will need someone in the physical world to forward evidence of your death and a copy of your will to Linden Lab. Linden Lab does not indicate if they will notify specific people on your friends list, meaning not everyone, just maybe you want a few people to know. And this kind of leads us into who gets our SL accounts when you die. Without proper planning, no one. Pursuant to Section 4.1 of Linden Labs, Terms of Service, you may not sell, transfer, or assign your account or its contractual rights, licenses, and obligations to any third party, including, for the avoidance of doubt, permitting another individual to access your account without prior written consent of Linden Lab. This is important to consider, especially if you run a group, a sim, own objects on a sim, or have a significant amount of Linden dollars. I'll just say one thing here. I help with a sin where one of its, actually the primary coordinator of it passed away. And we can no longer work with the prims that she placed on that parcel. Our choice is only to let them stay or to return them and never have access to them again. So this is why this is important. To permit someone else to access your SL account after you die, you must bequeath the account to them. There are several formal steps required by Linden Lab on one of their web pages. The page is noted in the resources of this presentation for later review. First, your will must indicate who is to become the new owner of your SL account. Be sure your executor is aware of this and share the required steps with them and your SL account inheritor. If you do not want your SL account deleted by Linden Lab, it's important your will indicate this. You may wish it remained for any number of reasons, including as a memorial for others. Your will must include the legal, physical world name of the inheritor of your SL account and assets, meaning Linden and inventory, in the event of your death. It should also reference your profile key, the unique identifier which is assigned to your SL account. Upon your death, your executor or SL account inheritor needs to open an SL support ticket. Under the type of problem, they should select Account Issue, followed by Change Account Details. This process requires several documents, including your death certificate, your will, a government-issued ID, and possibly a letter of testamentary. If it is required by a probate court, Linden Lab will require it also, so check your state's requirements. From the site Trust and Will, a letter of testamentary is a document granted to the executor of an estate by the probate court. This document gives the executor the authority he or she will need to formally act on behalf of the decedent. It gives the right to handle financial and other affairs related to closing out the estate. In essence, it offers the power to act in a truly fiduciary manner. At Linden Lab's request, additional verification of any party's identity, including the deceased, may be required. I know that was a lot of information, but in summary, a contact tree can help keep people informed. It can include both physical and virtual world contacts. And it really is a service. I have certainly wondered where people have gone. And sometimes years later they return, but some of them never have. And I think this is a huge gift we can give to those we care about in Second Life. If you can't make a contact tree, your will can be used to notify your friends list when you die. If you want someone to take ownership of your SL account, be sure to bequeath it to them in your will and ensure your executor and SL account inheritor understands your wishes. Good point, Ao. Thank you. Take away whatever resonates with you and make it your own. There's no wrong way to do this. Here's some resources that may be helpful, since we went over them in the presentation, but I would not remember everything. How to request a welfare check for someone is nicely laid out in WikiHow. The Linden Lab official death and other worries outside Second Life page, which goes over all the details of what is required to bequeath your account. And the SL support ticket webpage, which I have provided on my guidelines. I've provided these resources so people have them, my primary contacts. And what is a letter of testamentary, if you want to read that more in detail. So at this time, I'd like to open us up for any questions people may have.
Those can be typed, and we'll get to each of them. I'll also read them out. And I'd like to also give us an opportunity to talk about some of what this brings up. Have you experienced this before? It's not one of the most comfortable things to talk about, but I hope you can see why it makes such a difference if you're very involved with Second Life to have something like this in place. So Katz asks, what if you don't have a will? I would think that if you don't have a will, the main thing would be that you can't bequeath your account to someone. And
right.
I think we would have to have look at the guidelines from Linden Labs as far as, I believe they do need to see the death certificate, all of that kind of stuff for that. I don't know how much information. Shyla, do you know how much information they need in order to notify your friends list?
They need the page requesting it. So they need to see the signature page of your will, and at a minimum, I think it's the first, last, and the page which specifies you would like them to notify your friends list.
And that's just for notification, not for bequeathing?
Correct.
So they are going to want to know that you're really gone. So a will may be the only way to do that. Resistor asks, why not just set up an email address with an alias name? For what purpose, Resistor? How would that work?
For contact. So for contact, what we're talking about with the primary contacts, which are the ones that I suggest you provide key information, is they will be the ones who go looking for you out in the physical world. And you would need to know a person's location generally to find them, but a hospital will not confirm or deny, in most cases, whether or not someone is in it, at least in the United States, unless you have their full physical world name. Yes, it can be very difficult.
Very difficult when I tried to find someone. There were so many layers to that, aren't there?
Yeah, there really is. All right, let's see. Let's see here. Okay, lady. Well, let me do Mata, and then I'm taking it you'd like to voice. So
Mata asks. We'll go to Mata and then Lady Kirsten. Mata asks, is there a useful way to handle the occasion when someone decides to take the information they've been given as an additional contact, i.e. someone who attends events you attend, and broadcast it more widely in group notifications, for example, where you may not have preferred to make an announcement? That would
So
be a tertiary person.
it's we refer to them, I think, of additional. But if you'd like, Cattie, um, uh, what I would say here is this is where guidelines are helpful. It is uh, uh, good to put what you're willing to have shared, but you could also have in your guidelines, please emphasize uh, for it to not be placed in notices. You know, it's perfectly reasonable to do that. I don't think it's possible to control an individual's behavior, but it is possible to communicate that wish to your additional contacts through your primary and secondaries. Your primary would tell the secondary, and the secondary would pass it on to your additionals.
And it is the age of Facebook. In regular life, in the physical world, it's very difficult when people hear the news of someone passing and immediately go on to Facebook to say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sad about this, which is a little bit more about them than there is about sorrow when it hasn't even been able to be shared with all of that person's close family and relatives.
Yes.
Lady Kirsten, did you want to type or invoice?
I'd like to voice, if I may, please.
Certainly.
First of all, I'm working on this, Shyla. I learned about it from you at Death Cafe several months ago. Well, not several, a few months ago. Time has been funny for the last several months. And I'm working on mine. My partner and I developed a very close relationship. He spoke with my son. I spoke with his stepson. And we had an agreement, and he violated it. I told him he had to wait for me to go first. Mm-hmm. He could not go first. It doesn't work out that way, you know what? So, but he kind of knew he was getting. He was in a third relapse situation with COVID, and he sent me an email, and in it he said what he said, and he detailed what he wanted me to do with his different parcels, and what he hoped I would do with them. But you can do whatever you want to, but you will ask me, I know, what do you want? What do I want you to do? So that was very detailed in there. And he said, now, I think there's still time. I'd just like to make you an officer, and that will require the Lindens to contact you first so they just don't come and wipe away everything I've done over the years. So there was the second indicator for the Lindens. And the third one was, as long as my tears are getting paid, I'm alive. That was the hardest thing to read. So he'd given me passwords, of course, so that I could assume his avatar and take care of things for his store and various things like that. So I contacted the Lindens. This is before I met you, Shyla. I'm working on this now. I promise you. I contacted them. I told them about the email they said. I said, so please don't wipe it away. And I copied them, and they said, don't worry, this isn't our first rodeo. They didn't tell me about the sites you just gave, and thank you. I'm going to check them out. But I do check with them anyway once a month, just to be sure they still have my name. They've got my real name. They've got my phone number. They've got all of that actual information. So they call me. Should the tears stop, I will be called. Now, the next thing I can do is assume Bailey's, the avatar Bailey, and make myself that officer so that they will be inclined for that group territories, as Shyla was mentioning, to call me should, and they haven't yet, should the tears stop. The tears payments stop. So we're still hoping for him to recover. The other thing being we're in different countries. And while his stepson used to, in the beginning, he kept me appraised, but he felt rather, I could tell, he was ill at ease when Bailey introduced him to me. in person, in avatar on a screen one day. He said, "This is the person you tell if anything happens to me." And, he gave him my email address. And Bailey and my son have actually exchanged words. They've talked over the phone because I've been in and out of the hospital with my heart. So my son would bring Bailey into the hospital with him. But I could not do that where John is. They wouldn't allow because I wasn't immediate family or friend or anything. They
And
just
Kirsten,
didn't understand.
Kristen, it helps, I know, to have a little roadmap to follow now, but
Yes.
it's very difficult not knowing, isn't it? I think
Oh,
that
Lordy.
people need to hear today is this is difficult stuff to talk about, but having things in place really is a gift to the people that you care about,
It
and so
is.
you don't have to wonder.
But the other part is there's no other way for me. Um, I had to accept his stepson. From his ex-wife. They stayed in touch. I had to accept he wasn't comfortable with the fact that this man he'd called dad for a number of years had this relationship with an avatar. It just didn't sink in for him. My son's fine with it. He's watched over my shoulder and that. He's fine with it. So he had no problems.
The
But
good thing
it didn't work on the other end.
And the good thing
And
about having a contact tree is there are people, if you look at the bottom part of the fish, the secondary virtual, the top part, the physical world contacts, those are the people who are less likely to understand, to get the concept of relationship and all of that happens for us here in Second Life in the virtual world.
right,
So having these primary physical world and a primary virtual world, they can help be the buffers for that. So even if someone doesn't get it, because there are primary contacts, they can sort of help, make the wishes known and make the wishes happen in spite of, hopefully in spite of people saying, I don't get this. I don't want to have anything to do with this.
and unfortunately for us, um, that's what happened on the other side of the pond.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just want to open it up for any more questions, as I just want to make sure we're touching on a lot of different things. So Resistor says, that's where my idea went with the email address, someone with access from my personal environment. When we looked at the requirements for Linden Lab, depending upon whether you're just talking about being away or if you die, they're very different things. And just having an email is not an identity, and it's not something that Linden Labs would have to honor as far as the handling of your account.
Can I just make a couple of points arising from what's been said? First of all, I am a retired English lawyer, and if anybody in England, and it's got to be England, I can't advise on Scotland or Northern Ireland, wants to know, I'm quite happy to speak to them to tell them. Somebody said, what happens if I don't leave a will? Well, here in the UK, you obtain what's called letters of administration. They don't name any beneficiaries, obviously, because there's no will, but there is a strict line of rights of inheritance, which I won't go into, but I could imagine that if that were the situation, it would confuse Linden Labs no end. As to hospitals in the UK, my experience has always been that they will not give information other than to a relative. The first question that you get, you ring up and ask, how is Joe Bloggs? Are you a relative? So that may not help. You may be able to, you might find somebody who's helpful, but that is, as I say, in my experience, the usual tack that the hospitals take here. And the other difficulty is, of course, I'm just thinking of where I live. Yeah, we have a hospital, but in certain conditions, you get sent on to another hospital. For example, there is a specialist oncology hospital also, which people get sent to. So, you might find that you're
Yes.
in some trouble finding where people are.
I don't
Okay,
know if
that's
this
it.
happens there, but in the United States, when we have our medical information, we have to put down the names and contact information of the people we want to allow to receive information about our medical records, our medical situation, our status, all of that. They have to be on the list. And that doesn't have to be a relative. So your primary physical world contact and even your primary virtual world contact would be people that in the States you would want to have on that list of people who are allowed to know your medical status.
And it might also mean, and this again, depending on where you are and how your hospitals work, where I am, hospitals will not reveal to a non-relative what is happening with you, only if you are there or not there. But it's in one section we talked about passing primary contacts, your emergency contact names, and that's one of the reasons to do it, is so that they can reach out to an emergency contact and get status. And again, for all of this, everybody in the contact tree has to be okay with being in the contact tree and having their information shared, perhaps with people they don't know or don't know well. And that, I'll tell you, when I put mine together, that was probably the most challenging aspect, was trying for physical world primary contacts and emergency contacts, having to kind of explain what Second Life is and the bonds I have with people in a virtual world that they might see as a game.
That's part of why I like having people on both sides of that line of physical and virtual, because they can sort of support each other in sharing that information and helping smooth it. Nobody ever has to explain who they are, what they choose, but in a situation where information has to be shared, it can be helpful to have someone backing you up.
Yeah. And it also was helpful that my, through this model, the physical primary world contact, the primary physical world contact works, essentially has the primary virtual world's physical world contact information. They will speak to each other, which kind of makes that virtual world contact more real. And then, once everything is communicated, the virtual world contact understands how real this world is. Interesting, Wisdom. So Wisdom says, the police did not question my explanation of how I knew the people, but their friends were disturbed by it because they had no knowledge of this other life.
Yeah.
And John O'Connor, to AL's comments, John O'Connor says the same applies with hospitals in Ireland.
Good to know. And
Any
I
other
know
questions?
that for lists, there's all of the other stuff that goes along with this. It wasn't set up that you were the primary contact for this person, but you had enough information that you could start asking the questions to say, where is she? Where is she? And there's fallout from that. It's hard enough to lose somebody who we care about in Second Life, but to be that person who, you know, raised the alarm and actually made it happen, that they discovered what had happened in the physical world. And that's a lot to carry around.
I just want to thank you for your time and your questions. It is an honor to present to you.